Hello everyone and welcome to Questions and Answers. More footage from Guild Wars 2 Guru and Curse in the background there. I still haven't gone and got permission from anyone else just yet. It is on the agenda. And hey, actually there's another press beta coming up this weekend, I think. Everyone's suddenly talking about it. So hopefully we can get some more footage. A lot more will appear on YouTube and I can start using it from anywhere else. So that should be good. Let's just jump straight into it. So this is the first lore video I'm going to do. I'm going to try and do one day on more mechanical based things and the other day on more lore based things. Sometimes those kind of cross over a bit. One of the questions I've picked here seems to dip into both a little bit, but for now that's kind of the plan, so let's kick it off. The first question comes in from Xcape to YouTube, who says, what do you think about the Charr and humans being in peace together in Guild Wars 2? I really liked the hatred between these two races in Guild Wars 1. What's your opinion on this? This is a really big one, because when Guild Wars 2 was first being developed and that announcement first came out, we heard that we could play as multiple races. In fact, with the release of Eye of the North, this was kind of the big reveal here. And they really expanded on the storyline of the Charr during Eye of the North to try and get players used to the idea of the fact they're going to be playing as Charr in the second game, and that they've got all this history and all this lore behind them that maybe we hadn't seen before Eye of the North came out. And I remember there were always a lot of really mixed opinions about whether we should be able to play Charr. I still know a few people to this day who are really bitter about the fact that really one of the nemesis races from Guild Wars 1 have now been turned into this thing we're going to be able to play as, and they kind of feel like it's trivialized what the Charr were all about. But really, I quite like the way that ArenaNet have handled it. They've been quite tasteful about it, and they put a lot of thought into this piece coming about. Like, for example, speaking of Eye of the North, they didn't just release the expansion and then introduce a really crappy, half-assed excuse as to why the Charr and the humans were suddenly at peace. In fact, if anything, although you do see the seeds of peace essentially be sown in Eye of the North, really it just shows more than anything else how big the chasm between these two races are. I actually leave Eye of the North and the stuff that happens in that expansion thinking that it's going to be way harder for the Charr and the humans to be at peace than maybe we'd previously thought. So, yeah, I really do think that they handle it quite tastefully, especially if you read the novels. Obviously, they're set closer to Guild Wars 2's launch. They're set in the universe as this piece is about to break through, right? And there are some really good passages, especially in Ghost of Askel, and I like it the most, where there's this amazing scene, I believe it's in Lion's Arch where it happens, and there's a description of a human meeting a Charr there, and it goes on to describe about the hairs on the back of his neck kind of stand up, how much he hates these Charr just being in the area of just one Charr, and just there's all this tension between the two of these characters. It's really, really, really fantastically done, and I really like the depth that they've gone into with the hatred between the races. So even though there is now peace in Guild Wars 2, which is pretty essential, I'd say, to the gameplay, obviously ArenaNet want all the players to be on the same side. There's no evil factions or anything like that. They have still added quite a lot. I mean, there are separatist Charr, there are separatist humans out there, and there's a lot of really interesting lore, especially when you go into the blog posts and read about those, about all kinds of tensions in not just the humans, but also in the Charr who don't want this treaty to go through. With both races, there are people who don't like the idea. In fact, a huge part of the human lore is the idea that a lot of people don't like the current queen for enacting this treaty, and the same can be said about the Charr. The Imperator, the Iron Legion Imperator, is very unconventional, and that's the main reason why this has come through. So it's very, very cool. I think that for players who are very keen on this conflict between the two races and have grown up with Guild Wars 1 maybe and can only really see the Charr as enemies, there will be something there in Guild Wars 2 for them as well, so they can look on and they can see that it's not just a two-dimensional world. The treaty's only just happened, and there does seem to be a lot of stuff, at least in the blog post. It remains to be seen how much will come through in-game in the final product, but this world is in a situation where not everyone is loving what's happened. The treaty's very new. There's still a lot of people who disagree with what's happened with it, and hopefully, like I say, that will mean that in the gameplay we'll find some interesting things going on there. Me personally, I like that there's now the treaty. I like that we can now play as Charr, really, because if you look at the start of Guild Wars 1, right, the start of the first campaign, at the start of Prophecies, that's what's there at the opening cutscene. It's humans versus Charr. This was like core to the story. This is what we were introduced to. And then the Charr began to take a bit of a backseat, even through the start of Prophecies. The second half of that campaign really doesn't have much Charr in them, and for the later campaigns as well, there wasn't much Charr. So for ArenaNet to have sat down when they were designing Guild Wars 2 and to have decided that this original race would then become a major component in Guild Wars 2, I really like, especially considering that the Charr are quite a unique race as well as far as MMOs go. You don't really see many races anything like that. You see a lot of people like from the press who decide that they're going to start playing Guild Wars 2 and they're doing footage of it, and none of them know how to describe Charr, and that's really good because that means that the Charr are very unique and they're very identifiable on their own, and you can't just say, oh, that's an orc, and you can't just say, oh, that's an ogre race. They are their own thing. So I think they add quite a lot to Guild Wars 2, and if it means that there has to be a treaty so that they can become a playable race, then yeah, I'm up for it, especially because they've done it tastefully. They've not just said humans and Charr are best of friends now. It's nothing like that. There's still a lot of interesting grey areas to be discovered within that plot, and hopefully when we actually get in game, some of the personal stories will go into that in a far greater detail. The next question comes in from J Games, who says, since Guild Wars 2 is about stopping the Elder Dragons, do you think that after Guild Wars 2's initial launch, that there may be a chance we can go back to Cantha or Alona? Maybe there's something hidden away in the Guild Wars lore. I have no idea, but I hope you can give me an answer. Well, yes, definitely. I'm very, very much expecting us to be able to go to other expansions. I get this question a hell of a lot, actually, and there's a lot going on. Obviously, with Guild Wars 1, if you're not aware, the original campaign was based on the continent Tyria, but then as time went on, other continents were introduced to the game with these more campaigns, these standalone campaigns. This was a big part of the Guild Wars 1 business model. The idea was you wouldn't have expansions, you'd have standalone games, so that a player who maybe didn't buy Guild Wars when it first came out could then buy Factions, the second campaign, and that would just be a completely standalone game. And because of that, ArenaNet introduced in the lore these entirely new continents that were completely self-contained and seemed very distant from the original continents that were already in the game. Very quickly, that business model changed and they decided they were going to do an expansion, and then eventually Guild Wars 2 as well. But for that time, it did mean that now we've got this main continent that Guild Wars 2 is going to be launched on, Tyria, but there are these two other continents that players of the first game have seen, Alona and Cantha, and a lot of us are wondering what's going on with those continents. When Eye of the North was first revealed, and we kind of got our first little glimpse at Guild Wars 2 lore, they released something called the Movement of the World. This was this huge article that really highlighted the main changes that were happening all over the world, and there were paragraphs written in that article that explained what happened in these other two continents. So even though at Guild Wars 2's launch we're not going to be seeing what's happening there, I'm almost 100% sure we will, in time, be able to go back to those other continents and see what's going on. We've heard some general ideas, like, for example, the humans in one of the continents, Cantha, have become very xenophobic and have kicked out all the other races and sort of fortified and hold themselves off in their own city, so we haven't heard anything of them for a long time. And in the other continent, in Alona, we've been hearing about another threat having risen, this guy called Palawa Joko, who's damned them and is basically ruling from them, and because of the Elder Dragons disrupting things up near the Tyrian continent, we kind of don't have any contact with those places. So they're very mysterious right now, but lore has been written for them, and it definitely does seem like ArenaNet have got it in their plans to do something there. So it's very, very interesting. I think the main question a lot of us are asking is, does this mean that when Guild Wars 2's launch and we're looking at our first expansion, are we going to go immediately to these continents, or are ArenaNet going to focus on inventing other new continents first? I mean, what's the order they're going to do here? Are we going to have Guild Wars 2 launch and then we're going to go back to Cantha and then Alona in the same order we did with Guild Wars 1? Or are they going to mix it up a bit? Maybe they'll do a couple of expansions that have got nothing to do with those continents, and it will be years before we go back. Which actually I wouldn't mind to see happen, to be honest, because I feel like the longer we wait for our inevitable return to those locations, the more excited I'll get about it, and the more excited I'll be to see how they exist in the new game engine and with all the new mechanics. So yeah, it's very, very exciting. A lot of people will say it's a bit too early to be speculating about expansions, but I find it a lot of fun, and there is definitely just enough lore there for people to come up with some really interesting ideas about what could be happening in those continents in the future. But it's anyone's guess at the moment because it's still early days. The last question comes in from Gemeric1994, who says, will Underworld and Foe be in Guild Wars 2? I've never heard anyone taking this up. If you can answer, that would be awesome. Well, no, sadly, they're not. For anybody who doesn't know, essentially Guild Wars 1, where you could only play as humans, a lot of lore was written about the human religion, okay, and in particular, the human gods, of which there were 5 for a long time, but then there became 6. And it was established in Guild Wars 1 that each of these gods had their own realm tied to them, and in fact, in the first game, 2 of these realms players could go to. One was called the Fissure of Woe, and one was called the Underworld, and they were kind of elite endgame areas. For a long time, it seemed like ArenaNet, through updates, point as Guild Wars 1 grew older, we're going to add the other realms of the gods into the game as other elite endgame areas. All of the gods in lore have got places. We know that there are realms tied to all of them. However, as time went on and eventually the plans for Guild Wars 2 arose, that kind of got put on the back burner and we never saw that happen. So there were only ever two realms we could access, these two, the Underworld and the Fissure of Woe. There's actually an interesting quote from one of the developers who was talking about how she'd been planning out doing it for a while, and she even had a map of one of the realms she wanted to do, Dwayna's realm, which was really, really interesting. But as I said, it never came to be. So yeah, a lot of people are now asking, hey, what about in Guild Wars 2? Well, sadly, it doesn't look like that's going to happen, and that's because Guild Wars 2 isn't just about the humans anymore. Obviously, we have 5 playable races, and the result is that the human religion is not such a big topic in Guild Wars 2. You could argue a lot of Guild Wars 1 was basically about the human gods, but they take a very, very minor presence come the second game. So we won't be able to go into their realms. You can go back to the Temple of the Aegis, which was really the primary location that players would go to access those realms in the first game. You can go there, and there does seem to be some interesting lore there. Like, for instance, you will see portals to the Underworld still existing there in Guild Wars 2, and enemies like come out of them, but you can never travel through those portals, which is a real shame. You can break them, and they're a part of a couple of events, and I believe they're a part of the event chain that eventually leads to the summoning of the Shadow Behemoth, one of the early game bosses. But aside from that, no, we can't actually go to those realms. Maybe ArenaNet would eventually like to add those realms back. I would certainly be very interested in seeing that. There was really a third realm that you could go to in Guild Wars 1. During the plot of Nightfall, the third campaign, you could actually go to a place called the Realm of Torment, which was a realm belonging to a fallen god, essentially. And lore has got it written that this god, which has now been usurped by a new god called Cormyr, that we'll now know in Guild Wars 2, it has been written in lore that she now owns that realm, and I believe it's called the Redeemed Realm. So there has been lore written about the realms of the gods come Guild Wars 2's time, but does that mean we'll be going to the Redeemed Realm, or we'll be going back to the Underworld or the Fissure of Woe, or maybe even some of the ones we haven't seen yet that they had planned for Guild Wars 1? I don't know. I'm not particularly hopeful, though, I must admit. The humans should only really be getting a fifth of all the content now come Guild Wars 2. I don't think that we should expect ArenaNet to release all 6 realms of the god come Guild Wars 2, unless it became some kind of a microtransaction thing. A long time ago, and this did worry a lot of people, but a long time ago we were hearing that they were considering selling dungeons and things as microtransactions, and hey, if they did in the end up going for that, and I'm not saying that they will, it definitely seems like they've dropped that idea for now, but if they did end up going for that, that's really the only way I could imagine the realms of the gods becoming a thing, which isn't something I think I'm a massive fan of, but hey, you never know, maybe they will release an update every now and then. It has been said that the live team are going to be splitting in 2 after Guild Wars 2's launch. Half of them are going to work on the next expansion to the game, and the other half are going to be focusing purely on streaming updates and content expansions to the world that had already been released. So it's more than possible that that half of the company will be adding Realms of the Gods. I mean, that's a lot of employees, so I guess we can expect a lot of streaming updates. Only time will tell, but right now we haven't heard that there are any plans to do so. We just know that there's a little bit of lore still out there involving them. But that's it for this episode, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you've got any questions, please feel free to leave a comment. As I said at the end of the last episode, I will still be reading comments from the original video I put up a couple of days ago, just because there's so many here and I feel like I want to answer a few. I think I'll start answering a few that have got quite a lot of thumbs up as well, so do watch out for that. And yeah, I guess that's about it, guys. Thanks very much for watching, and I guess I will see you next time.